What up, what up, what up? Welcome into the Bleacher Report app. We are the Green with Envy podcast. My name is Will Weir, and we are excited to talk about some Boston Celtics basketball, and 'tis the holiday season. So we're going to have a holiday theme to our conversation today. So we're going to do a holiday shopping list. And, just because it is the giving season, we're going to have a wish list too. We're going to have a couple of wishes that we want for the Boston Celtics this season. So as you said, happy for you guys to join us. Come on in the chat. We got a couple of polls. We want this to be interactive. So make sure you guys are throwing off your comments. We'll try to shout a few out as we get going here. As I said, my name's Will. I'm one of the hosts of Green with Envy podcast. And as you see, joining me today, we got the coach, Greg Manakis, and we've got the lead writer from Celtics blog. It's our guy, Adam Taylor. Collectively, we're known as the three-man weave. And so, Greg, I want to start with you here. Okay. We're going to get into a shopping list. We're going to listen. Boston Celtics, 20-6, first place in the Eastern Conference. 'Tis the season, but we're going to get a little greedy in this season. We're going to start talking about some little extra things we want to add. But let's be real from the jump here. This team's pretty freaking good as is right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything that we're going to talk about today, as you said, it's like the dream scenario wish list. Most of my answer, honestly, is I feel pretty good about where the Celtics are at, if we're just being completely transparent from the front. But there are a couple names out there that I would be interested in. I would at least have the conversation about trading one of our top 8 guys in order to bring in someone that I believe can play in a game 7, right? That's kind of where I'm approaching all these like bigger names on the trade market is, do we bring in somebody that we know 100% will be in the Celtics rotation, no matter how far into the playoffs they go?
Yeah, and that's going to be a big question, right? Because this is the end game that the Celtics are in. We're playing for getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, getting to the NBA Finals, and then winning a banner. So with that, Adam, let's start the shopping list. Let's start looking around the league. Let's start looking at who it is that we may want to add to this already pretty dangerous squad. And let's go to the bigs, because there was a rumor the other day from The Athletic, which actually coincided with a Shams report. The Celtics are going to look to kind of, strengthen the bench. And a good place to start was The Athletic rumor that Beef Stew, who's your boy, was in the mix. So do you want to start with Beef Stew, or you got somebody else in mind, Adam?
No, we can start with Beef Stew. Like, I think that's the type of deal that makes sense, but it's just not realistic at this point. Like, it doesn't make sense this season at all. Mainly because of his contract situation, right? So Beef Stew's got a poison pill in his deal. So what that means is the Celtics would need to send out about $13 million in salary, but Detroit only really need to receive $5 million. So they'd be taking an $8 million in salary hit to make that deal work. That means for Boston, it's going to be somebody like Al Horford being sent out in that deal just to make the salary matching work. Look, I love Beef Stew, one of the best nicknames in the league. I love the physicality that he brings. I just like the swagger that he plays with, the aggressiveness. But if it means trading away Al Horford and what he means to this team, how he's playing off the bench, that's not a deal I'm willing to make now. Maybe in the offseason, there could be a discussion about that when the poison pill's been removed and salary matching's a bit easier. But for right now, that's a no from me.
You feel the same way, Greg?
Yeah, there's no way that I would trade for Beef Stew if it means we have to give up Al Horford. That poison pill, even on some of the bigger podcasts, like I heard the Bill Simmons podcast with Ryan Russillo, he was talking about Beef Stew. I don't even know if they brought up the poison pill, implications there, because we can't just cobble together contracts out, right, without giving up someone like Al Horford, who's making that $10 million range. So I'm a no on Beef Stew, although I would like to see him in green at some point. He can waste away on the Pistons for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, using the type of player that Beef Stew is, right? He's going to be a guy that will bring toughness to this team, right? You think back to him as, I believe it, when he was a rookie, when he went full Myles Garrett, just breaking through security, trying to go after LeBron James, right? Like, you don't see that happen every day. So, like, from a toughness standpoint, like, Beef Stew is going to bring that. And he's also going to be a guy that can, they're experimenting, not well, with him playing with Jalen Duren and him expanding his range as a shooter, right? To pretty mixed reviews, and we'll also say pretty poor reviews. Around one of the longest losing streaks in NBA history. And so, with Beef Stew, he does bring a guy that would be able to bring you toughness, like I said, and I think also bring you another component of a guy that potentially could play the 4/5, which a little bit is kind of that Grant Williams hole that I think we're trying to fill, but do it on the cheap, because that's the reason that we have this hole, is that Grant Williams got too expensive. He got to that beef stew range, which they weren't going to pay. And so it's hard to figure out how that would make sense. So I think for the Celtics, as we're looking at big men, they got to start to look a little bit, they got to go bargain bin shopping, right? We're not shopping at the high-end luxury boutiques. We're going bargain bin shopping here for Christmas. And so, Adam, you and I have talked about this before, so I'll go back to you on this to start here. Two names that we've thrown out, and you take it where you want here, have been, Andre Drummond, veteran on the Bulls, a little over $3 million, and Xavier Tillman of the Memphis Grizzlies, who just came back from an injury, kind of up and down since he came back. Obviously, Ja Morant came back in a very exciting way for the Grizzlies, so I think that might depend on where their season's going. But I know Andre Drummond's been someone you're looking at. Greg gave 2 thumbs down, so I'll let you take from there.
Well, can I jump in real quick before we start talking about Andre Drummond? Because if I had more thumbs, I would give more thumbs down for Andre Drummond. But I do want to just shout out some people in the chat. A lot of people right now are just saying hey, we don't need to make a trade right now, right? This team just needs to do X, Y, and Z in order to, better themselves on the court. So I just wanted to preface that. If I had more thumbs, I would give more for Andre Drummond. Adam, feel free to talk me out of it. Talk why I don't need more thumbs right now.
Yeah, I've been completely out on adding Drummond to this team for years. Every time he's been floated over the last few seasons, I've been very, very vocal on multiple social media platforms about why they shouldn't do that deal. That mainly was because under Ime, under Brad, it was a very switch-heavy system. The 5-man was part of that switching system. This season, they're running drop, and they need another physical presence coming off the bench. I don't think Drummond brings anything in terms of basketball IQ. He's a solid rebounder. He's physical. He can just give you a different dimension when you're playing against teams like Orlando and Miami, when they're trying to play a bit more bruising. I don't think he's going to cost you much in terms of a trade. So it's a low risk, low reward. It's not a big trade. It's not going to cost you anyone important. I'm not sold on it. I think there's other options out there. I do have another option that makes a lot more sense that doesn't involve a trade, which we could talk about in a bit. But for me,
throw it out there now. Let's see what you got.
For me, I'm at the point now where if Nimi continues to play the way he is, just convert that deal and be done with it.
Another big part of this.
Yeah, just convert that deal the same way you did with Luke Cornett and Sam Hauser a few years back. Let Nimi be that 4th big man. Let him and Luke fight it out for that 3rd string spot, create a bit of competition and be done with needing to look for a big man. You've seen what he can do. He's young. He's shown a few flashes of some athleticism. So if he can improve his finishing around the rim, he'd be a good kind of rim running replacement for what you lost in Rob in terms of size and energy. But if you do want to go and get a veteran, Drummond kind of makes sense in a really small vacuum.
Yeah, and I think Nimi does, a lot of what Drummond offers on the court anyway, and he's a younger option. He's a little bit of a cheaper option, especially considering you don't have to give up an asset to get Nimi. You just have to convert that contract from a 2-way contract into a regular contract. And I think with Nimi, what we've seen with Cornette being out is his physical presence, the raw athleticism and the sheer physicality that he brings to the court is important, man. I know he's not the most fundamentally sound big right now in the league. He still makes mistakes on defense. He still makes mistakes on offense, but he needs the reps, right? That's my big argument with giving this chance to Nimi right now, is that I want to just see him get the reps at the NBA level. You can throw him into the G League and let him develop in there, but I do think it's worthwhile. What we've seen is enough. I tweeted out last night, maybe we should stop evaluating him through the lens of, Neemias Queta is not ready yet, right? That's what everybody says right now. He's just not ready. He's just not ready, no matter who you talk to. What if we start evaluating through the lens of maybe he is ready, right? And if you start evaluating him through that lens, you give him a real opportunity to make an impact on the court, as he already has. We're going to see Horford out tonight against the Warriors. Porzingis is going to be missing some games. Cornette's still out. So he's getting a real opportunity right now. And while we have, a couple months before the trade deadline, let's see what we have out of Queta. And at the end of these 2 months, when that's up, we can make that decision. Adam, you tell me why I'm wrong about the timelines here, in case we need to convert that 2-way sooner. But I do think that we need to give him a chance. And then once we figure out the big man situation, we look to the guards. And that's where guys like Alex Caruso and, John Wall and Austin Rivers, guys that we'll talk about here in a second, come into play.
Yeah, so before we get to the guard, I just want to shout out, we got a poll going right now. Put a couple names out there for which big man the Celtics should go after. And honestly, Greg just made a great case for, and Adam, that maybe there isn't a need to, because Luke's been playing pretty well. He's hurt right now. Keita's getting this chance, and we're seeing more out of him than expected. So maybe that is enough to roll forward. But in the poll right now, it looks like it's pretty evenly contested here. Andre Drummond slightly in last place, through Beef Stew in there. Xavier Tillman, who's a guy that I think from the Grizzlies, a few people in the chat mentioned he does kind of fit that Grant Williams archetype for $2 million, though. So quite a considerable savings as far as being able to play small ball 5, being able to play with Al Horford or with Kristaps Porzingis. And then I threw Uncle Jeff in there for fun, because I think that's a little bit tougher. I really like Jeff Green. He's been on every team in the NBA basically, and continues to find himself in prominent positions in the playoffs. But it's going to be a little bit, he's got a $9.6 million contract over the next 2 years. And so that's going to be really tough to make it work. But I think that is a good transition to start looking at the guards. And we can feel free to mix in some wings here as well, if you guys want to as well. But
seen Sadiq Bey's name in the chat a little bit.
I've seen Sadiq Bey a lot in there. And I think that's interesting that I hadn't really thought of quite as much. And that's partially just because of the Hawks are such a weird team. I don't know which direction that they're trying to go with their team. And, Sadiq Bey does get considerable minutes for that team. I think it's his 3rd year, 4th year. So, depending on how they feel about him, that's just a weird spot. But I do like that name of Sadiq Bey. But Greg, you mentioned Alex Caruso. So let's go there, because this is a name that's going to be on the tip of everybody's tongue across the NBA that covers the sport. Alex Caruso fits with any and every team that exists out there. And a lot of people actually think he might be a bigger return than Zach LaVine, despite the disparity in the contract size. So Caruso, about $9.6 million. Once again, like I mentioned with Jeff Green, it's a little bit tough to make that work. You're definitely dipping in to the Peyton Pritchard fund here. So Peyton Pritchard's going to be about $6 million. He's also part of that poison pill, like we talked about with Beef Stew. A little bit more manageable with Peyton Pritchard, but he's going to be about $6 million or so going out. Adam, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think it's about $6 million or so. So it makes it a little bit easier to get to that Caruso number when bringing him in. But you're probably looking at draft capital. But Greg, just tell me from a fit standpoint, why Alex Caruso might be the guy that makes sense to go with the limited assets, quote unquote, all in.
Well, going back to my initial thesis statement at the beginning here of this broadcast, my point is, if we're going to make a trade and we're going to give up on Peyton Pritchard, and I really like Peyton Pritchard, he's been playing great basketball over the past couple of weeks, 3-point shots coming around, the corner threes looking good, and all the intangibles that he's bringing, the hustle that every single night, Peyton Pritchard is going to bust his butt on the court, right? My question is, can Peyton Pritchard unequivocally play all 4 rounds of the playoffs? And I don't know that the answer is yes. If we're in a game 7 on the road in the NBA finals, is Peyton Pritchard going to have Joe Mazzulla's trust? I think the answer is no, honestly. That's kind of where I'm at with Pritchard right now. I don't think he plays in that game 7. But if we did move him for Alex Caruso, I don't think there's any way that Caruso doesn't see the floor in a game 7 on the road. And if this team, we're all in on a championship in this 2-year window, if we want to maximize that 2-year window, then you have to push all the chips in. And if you're thinking Peyton Pritchard or Alex Caruso, and that might be the difference between an NBA Finals and Banner 18 or another year in which people freak out and say we need to trade Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the offseason, then I think you need to push the chips in to get a Caruso. The issue with getting Caruso is that everybody wants Caruso, and that there's going to be a lot of people competing over him. But from a fit standpoint, man, he's one of the best defensive guards in the league. He can guard up and he can guard down. He can guard all the way up to the 4. You've seen him in the past guard Giannis in a game. He was a primary matchup on Giannis.
Former teammate
so I think when you have Peyton Pritchard on the court, he can guard 1, he can guard with Alex Caruso, he can guard 1 through 4, and that if God forbid somebody goes down, Derek White goes down, who's been one of the best players this year for the Celtics. If Drew Holiday goes down, we have somebody else that can slide right in and do pretty much 90% of what they can do on a regular basis, and maybe even 100% of what they can do on the defensive side of the ball.
Adam, your thoughts?
So I was creating a poll, and now it's doubled up, so bear with me. Okay, yep. So my bad. Yeah, I think I'm all in on Caruso. What you said about, just to be a bit of a Debbie Downer, the poison pill with Pritchard is he would make up $6 million of the salary going out to Chicago, but he would only be $4 million of the salary like creating salary space for Boston. So you still need to kind of find that extra $2 million because of the way Celtics are with that second apron, that luxury super tax, as everybody's kind of coined it. It makes things a little bit more difficult to make the money line up. Still manageable. For me, Caruso, and I've got it here, I actually wrote a cheat sheet that isn't live yet, but it'll be coming out in USA Today. In brackets, it says Alex Caruso, the dream scenario. Because I think that, as we said, Nimi to me makes a lot of sense after being converted from a two-way into a full-time contract. That resolves your big man concerns. And then going to get Caruso just fills you with, as Greg said, you've got three guys that are very similar in terms of the way they play in Derek, Drew, and Caruso. All competitive, all multi-talented, can all defend their butts off, can play offense. I would feel a lot more comfortable if it was Caruso coming off the bench. I put a poll out before I started speaking. Would you trust Pritchard in a game 7? 60% of people are saying no at the moment and then there was a second one that went up and 88% of people, it was a very short-lived poll, said that they would.
Yeah, I tried to do some editing here in the background. 88% of people said no. So Caruso just makes the most sense. I think out of everybody that you're looking at who's a guard and who would potentially be available, and by all accounts, all the reporting coming out of Chicago is Caruso's the one guy they don't want to part with at the moment. You know, they'd sooner lose Levine and DeRozan and Vucevic than they would Caruso. Yeah. That should tell you a lot about the type of player that he is and how he's viewed, even in a situation where they're trying to get out from under some bad contracts. If you can bring him into Boston, I think he elevates you even further, and that's probably that one missing piece that really tips the scales in your favor. And part of the Caruso thing is that's the leverage they have, right? Like with Levine, with DeRozan's on expiring and it's a large contract. Levine has multiple years left and doesn't seem to be a ton of value. So for Caruso, they are also, which they're going to have a huge market for him. They're also kind of trying to use that as leverage to get as much as they can for him, knowing that their other assets are not going to bring as much in return. But to the other poll that you put out here, Adam, would you trade Peyton Pritchard to upgrade? I mean, to me, this was a little surprising to see how overwhelming that 79% said yes, that they would trade Peyton Pritchard to upgrade. And I think there's no doubt that Caruso would be an upgrade. For me, it just comes down to the amount of assets that you have to get to be able to bring that in. What are we looking at? 2 first-round, like Peyton Pritchard and 2 first-round picks, basically add in, whether it's Fee or Lamar Stevens, whatever, like, depending on where you're getting to with that pick equity, that's where it gets a little bit steep. And to your point, Greg, yes, if Drew Holiday or Derek White go down, I feel way better about having Alex Caruso. But if they're both healthy, which both of them have great track records of being healthy, I think it's hard to justify 2 future first-round picks when you're so limited going forward to go ahead and make a move like that, despite the fact that Caruso is probably the best name of anyone that we're going to talk about. So I think for me, it's more maybe from a guard position, adding depth, adding someone that, maybe Peyton Pritchard's not the answer, but maybe there's someone else that you can try at a lower cost. And I'm not saying this is the best route. I'm certainly not saying that. Alex Caruso, Adam, you talked about it in your article. Yeah, that's the dream scenario. Dream scenario would be we can get Alex Caruso at a reasonable rate. But that's where I think you see today, there was the Chris Haynes report from Bleacher Report where he talked about, we don't know if the Celtics were there or not, but Austin Rivers and John Wall going through workouts. Half the league was there checking on them. A name that I wanted to throw to you guys, because I'm curious. I don't know if this is the name that you all have thought of, but local New England guy, went to Providence, kind of rejuvenating his career. How we feel about a little Chris Dunn? Chris Dunn's out in Utah with old friend Danny Ainge. Could maybe get on about a $2 million deal. Once again, very easy from salary perspective. And the biggest knock on Chris Dunn has been he just can't shoot, right? He's a liability, complete liability, like Ryan Gosling and Remember the Titans. Just a liability out there on offense if you put him out there. But over the last 2 seasons, it's really about, 20, it's about a quarter of a season last year and about a quarter of the season so far. His shooting splits have gotten a lot better this year. 47% from the field, 37% or just under 37% from 3. Last year, they were really, really high numbers, 47% from 3 and 54% from the field. I don't think that's sustainable, but somewhere in the middle of that, that's really good for a guy that could be your 3rd or 4th option as a guard if you want to have another option to Peyton Pritchard. What do you guys think about Chris Dunn?
I like it, man. I like Chris Dunn. He offers a lot of what Caruso offers without having to give up Pritchard, right? He's a really good defender. He came out of college with the reputation of being one of the best defenders in the class. The offensive struggles, as you mentioned, are what caused him to almost be out of the league. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I've watched a lot of Utah Jazz this year, but I did watch a little bit of them last year because they were so interesting and they had Will Hardy as a coach. And I was just doing the comparisons between Mazzulla and Hardy. And, did we miss out on that, on the coach and whatnot? And I think with Chris Dunn, what I saw out of him last year, and I'm assuming it's continued this year because I've heard some of the NBA pundits say he's still playing well, is that he's getting really good slashing to the basket. And if those shooting numbers can at least be NBA average, his defensive intangibles and his defensive measurables, I think he's like 6'3", 6'4", but really long wingspan, really strong. I think Chris Dunn brings a lot of what Caruso could bring without necessarily being the guy that can play in a game 7. If you bring in Chris Dunn, it's to kind of just be depth behind Peyton Pritchard, and maybe you don't trust Delano Banton to hold down that emergency guard spot, and you think Chris Dunn can. So I think that's where he kind of fits into it. He's more of a Banton upgrade than a Pritchard upgrade. So I don't necessarily know that moves the needle. But if we don't want to give up on Peyton Pritchard as an organization, which I would understand the argument because of the contract moving forward, I think that he's a good second option if we can't get Caruso.
Yeah, for me, I always caution reading too much into small sample size numbers. Like a quarter of the season last season, quarter of the season this season so far, it's half a season. My biggest concern is fit matters. Your situation where you're playing, the system that you're playing in, everything has an effect on how well you're doing. So because Dunn's playing well for Will Hardy in the Jazz's system doesn't mean that you trade for him and he replicates that for Boston, especially in a system that's going to be a little bit more reliant on him shooting threes. He's not going to be a point of attack defender as much as just a helper and a system guy. I'm not sure the fit makes sense, and I like Delano Banton for the size that he brings, the length that he brings. I think his navigation off the screen is ridiculously good for somebody as raw as what he is. Gets wherever he wants to go when he's running the pick and roll. I feel probably a little bit more comfortable with Banton there just because I don't buy into such a small sample size from Dunn, especially when it's only been in one situation and everywhere else he's struggled.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And, right now we have a poll out there. Which guard should the Celtics go after? I put Caruso in there, Dunn, Rivers / Wall. And then I threw Davion Mitchell, and that's mostly for tonight. Celtics play the Kings. Adam had a preview podcast with Brendan Nunez from the Kings. Does great coverage for the Kings. You guys should go check him out. And they talked a little bit about Davion Mitchell, who's been, kind of really lost his place with the Kings. So it's an interesting, low risk type maneuver for a younger guy. But it's overwhelming here. It looks like Alex Caruso would be the favorite, which I think we all agree is the dream. It's just, what is the cost to go ahead and get that? But we got a couple more minutes left here, guys. And I want to actually get to one last thing. So this was our shopping list that we went through, right? This is what we know is potentially on the shelf. Now let's start wishing. Let's take it to another realm here. And so, Adam, let's go back to you here. If you had one wish for this during this holiday season for the Celtics team for the remainder of the year, what would it be?
Is the basic winning a championship ruled out? Is it, because that just
if you want to be the Love Actually of this podcast, you can go ahead and do it, man. Everybody loves Love Actually. Everybody loves a championship. It's the basic answer, but it's not the wrong answer either.
You got your placards to pull out.
Yeah, I'm going to preface this with obviously a championship is everybody's dream. So with the next answer I give, it's secondary to a championship. But honestly, just to see Jaylen Brown keep growing the way he's been growing, he's been absolutely phenomenal for the past couple of weeks. His playmaking's really improved. I wrote about it today. There's so many different ways to be a playmaker. It doesn't necessarily mean creating out of the pick and roll. Doesn't mean you have to create off the dribble. Brown's doing it by just being a score-first guy and then making reads as the defense collapses. Over the last few seasons, his struggles have been when the Celtics have tried to fit him into the Jason Tatum mold. Hey, we're going to get you to run some pick and roll, draw a double, and then make a read out of it. That's not really what Brown's about. Now that he's playing something like a role that suits him more, his playmaking's improved, his scoring's improved, his aggression, even his defense has had an uptick because there's a confidence there. So that would be the secondary point on my wish list, is just to keep this version of Jaylen Brown all the way through the season into the playoffs.
Yeah,
I
that's your
love
guy,
that.
Greg. So I figure you got more to say.
No, man. I mean, for everyone that's maybe checking us out for the first time, so our podcast is called Green with Envy, right? I talk about Jaylen Brown on almost every podcast, and people are sick of me talking about how much I love Jaylen Brown and how much he's improved his rim reads, specifically. Like I think kind of what Adam's alluding to. He drives the ball to the basket every play, right? Jaylen is just going to the basket, reckless abandon, and now it's not reckless anymore. Right? Can you just go to the basket with abandon? I don't know if that even makes sense.
I mean, I like the mid-range game too. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, no, I mean, his post creation's been awesome. Here I am talking about how much I love Jaylen Brown. But I think that if I had one wish for the holiday season, it's for the Celtics as a team to trust Derek White just a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. That 3-point shot is money right now, but he's still not being asked to, create in the pick and roll quite as much as I would like to see Derek White. They have been bringing him into more actions towards the end of games. Like 2 games ago, I think it was the whole fourth quarter, we basically went Tatum with Derek White in the inverted screener role. And we just loved that 2-man game. So, we are utilizing Derek White in 2-man actions more, which is great, but I want to see the ball in his hands just a little bit more, and utilize Tatum as a screener, utilize Brown as a screener. I think that would be really nice to see because I trust most of the decisions, like 99% of the decisions that Derek White makes on the basketball court. I trust him. So I would like to see the Celtics as a team to increase Derek White's usage rate, especially in the fourth quarter, because I do think that he's going to get the Celtics into good offense as a pure point guard should.
So I think this leads right into my wish as well, because you're the JB guy. I feel like I'm the Derek White guy on this show. And for me, it's Derek White's making an all-star push. I don't know that he's gonna get there. Once again, we're wishing here. This is what I'm wishing for. Polls are open, by the way. Go vote for the Celtics for the All-Star game in Indianapolis. And right now, Derek White 15, 5, and 4 with just about 2.5 stocks per game, steals and blocks combined per game, playing all NBA defense. But it's a tight squeeze to get him to that all-star game. You got guys like Brunson, Maxey, and Halliburton all feel like guaranteed locks at this point. I think there's a good chance probably Damian Lillard with a 40-piece last night. He's probably getting there. And then we haven't even talked about Donovan Mitchell or Trae Young. And you look at some of those wild card spots in that front court, and it gets, there's a whole slew of guys that are going to be there. But, I think for Derek White, something for me that I look at is just what he does on both sides of the ball. And so, you look at the way that he defends, the way that he, you're talking about his offense right now. I think that's the part of Derek White that is blossoming, and why you made the case for he needs the ball in his hands more, is he really makes the wrong decision. And right now his 3-point shot is just on point. It is by far the best shooting.
Dude, he took 18 3-pointers last night.
It was a lot. They were all mostly open. So it was, it was a lot of threes last night. A lot of threes from Derek White. But I think he's making an outside push for an all-star case. Would love to see him get there because he's in that role of high-level role player that probably won't get there. But he's at least in the conversation, which I think is a credit to him, in and of itself.
Yeah, dude, I think he deserves to be in that conversation. At the end of the day, if the Celtics are going to get 3 All-Stars, we need to continue to win at this clip. Like games like last night against the Warriors can't happen because there's so much depth in the Eastern Conference that if we want 3 All-Stars, it's going to be about the team's success, because Jaylen has played his way into an all. I think there's no doubt at this point that Jaylen.
I was going through and trying to figure out who the locks were. I think JB at this point for me, when you look at that front court, it's Giannis, Tatum, and Embiid are probably the 3 starters, let's say, right? And then I think when you look at the other locks, I feel like Jaylen Brown, maybe Scotty Barnes has been really good. They got to be in that conversation. Jimmy Butler, but then there's a lot of guys, but I think JB is playing himself into that lock. So my question, Adam, let me ask you this. If the Celtics were to get 3 All-Stars as of today, as of December 20th, prior to them playing the Kings tonight, who are the 3 All-Stars that the Celtics that you think have a chance to get in?
Jaylen, Jason, Derek.
Greg?
Yeah, I don't think there's a question. Who would be the other one? Porzingis?
Porzingis would be the other one for me that I think would definitely have a chance to get in there. I mean, I think he's in that front court mix. So yeah, for me, it would be the 2 Jays, and then it becomes Porzingis or Derek.
Well, I think the only reason Porzingis gets in is because of the lack of front court depth in the East versus being the 3rd best player on the team at this point in the season. I think Derek White has played his way into that. Like, he's by far the third best player. You could make an argument he's been the second best player for the team if you really wanted to. And then, Porzingis, I think with him, the injury concern, obviously it's going to be there. He would have to do something pretty special over the next probably the next month or so to warrant all-star consideration, in my opinion. I think he's been really good for this team. He's been a game changer. He's been super impactful, completely changed the geometry of the floor with this 5-out offense. But I don't think that he's been playing at a quote-unquote all-star level just because of how well the other guys been playing.
Guys, I'm going to be real. We're spoiled. Just having this conversation about who's our third or fourth all-star and who has the merits and credentials for it.
Dude, we're like, we all got PS5s, or we got PS6s on this team. And we're like, oh, I want a Super Nintendo. Bro, let me get my Super
I wanted the
Nintendo
VR headset this year. Come on, guys. Why can't I have everything? But, it is the holiday season. The Celtics have, coming off a rough loss last night against the Warriors. They got the Kings tonight. Clippers on the weekend, and then of course the big Christmas Day showdown with the Los Angeles Lakers, which is going to be a ton of fun. But guys, I had a ton of fun on this right now. Shout out to Bleacher Report for having us back again. Once again, we are the Green with Envy podcast. You guys can find us on Spotify, Apple. We have a Discord channel if you want to come join the fun. You want to come talk to us directly. We have those links in all of our bios. So come find us.
Real quick, everyone in the chat. Recently, we had Mike Gorman on the pod. We had Steve Cerruti of the Ryan Russillo podcast on the pod. Caitlin Cooper, who covers the Indiana Pacers, on the pod. We've had a lot of great guests. We had Drew Carter, whether you love him or hate him, the new Celtics announcer, had him on the pod recently. So we've got a lot of great guests that come on.
Don't forget Grant Williams, Jay Scrub,
Marquise Daniels, Dana Barros. Yeah. We've had some of the legends come back. So come hang out with us. We have a good time. Hopefully you enjoyed this here. Again, shout out to Bleacher Report. For Adam, for Greg, my name's Will. We're Green with Envy, a.k.a. the 3-Man Weave. And we'll catch y'all later. Have a happy holiday season to you and yours.